Greetings, scholars, my name is Wormwood and welcome back to Chinese Honorifics. In the last episode, we learned how to use jian to talk about ourselves in a self-deprecating and humble manner. However, unlike gui, which can be used to address others and their organizations, you wouldn't use jian when talking about your own organization. Instead, what is most commonly used is the topic of today's video, the honorific prefix ben. Actually, I lied about that. Because we're going to talk about two prefixes in today's video, ben as well as bi. Why two, you ask? Long story short, I was going over my notes and realizing that while these two have different meanings, which we'll get to in a moment, there is a lot of overlap with how you use them. So instead of making two videos with like 80% identical content, I decided to brutally unalive two fluffy dinosaurs with a single stone chime. That's how that saying goes, right? Before getting into the nitty-gritty of how to use these prefixes, let's take a quick look at each character on their own, shall we? The character ben originally meant root or stem, showing a tree with a line indicating the base of the trunk. This meaning was gradually stretched to include more abstract concepts like origin, foundation, as well as this, current and present, like ben ri, this day, today, ben di, this place, here, and ben chao, this dynasty, the current dynasty. As for bi, this character originally meant worn, torn, or shabby clothing, and depicts a hand holding a stick beating a very ragged piece of cloth with bits coming off of it. Because having self-esteem is haram in Confucian societies, calling yourself a beatable rag naturally lent itself to various humble expressions. Now, as honorific prefixes, both of these are used in formal settings to refer to oneself or one's organization, school, company, etc. There are, however, some very important differences. Starting with ben, it is by far the mildest and most neutral of the honorific prefixes, because unlike most humble prefixes, you're not actually calling yourself a retarded loser who stacks no paper and gets no bitches, but rather you're just referring to yourself as well as your in-group in the third person, which is politeness 101 in Asiatic languages. To make a parallel with English, it's like using one and oneself instead of I, me, and myself. Furthermore, because ben also means this, there is some possibility for ambiguity here. If we take ben gong si as an example, depending on context, it can mean our company when talking to someone outside of the company, the company when talking to someone within the company, this company when talking about some company in general that may or may not be your own. Lastly, due to its neutrality, ben is by far the most common of the two in a modern formal setting. Because when referring to oneself in the third person, you create a polite distance without actually putting yourself in an inferior position, which is more in line with modern ideas of equality. Ironically, it's still often used alongside gui in order to elevate the recipient or listener, because while today everyone is technically equal, some people are still more equal than others. The second character, bi, is more explicitly humble and lacks both the neutrality and ambiguity that ben has. If we pick up the company ball and run with it, 毕公司 can only be interpreted in one way, my or our humble company, when talking to someone outside of the company. This is because A, you wouldn't call your own company shabby towards your coworkers, and definitely not your boss unless you're looking to get fired, and B, you most certainly wouldn't be calling someone else's company shabby unless you're looking to start a fight. Now that we have a pretty solid understanding of the differences and similarities of ben and bi, let's see some examples using them in a sentence, starting with 本公司 and 毕公司。我们需要有人管理本公司的销售部。我们需要有人管理本公司的销售部。We need someone to manage our company's sales department. 毕公司对担任贵公司代理一事非常感兴趣。B 公司对担任贵公司代理一事非常感兴趣。We are very interested in acting as an agent for your company. Nerd note, in this sentence, using ben or bi don't necessarily change the meaning when translated into English, but using bi implies a superior-inferior relationship, like a smaller company contacting a larger company, or, as in the example, one company trying to arrange a contract with another company, implicitly asking for a favor. Of course, you can use both bi and ben in other situations, such as 本人 and 鄙人. Both 本人 and 鄙人 can replace 我 in formal speech and writing. Note, however, that 本人 can also mean self, as in 我本人, I myself. Which meaning is intended is often made clear from context. Some examples. 本人已迁居来信请转新职本人已迁居来信请转新职 I have moved. Please forward any incoming mail to my new address. 拜读今日贵公司招聘广告必人特自应征该职位拜读今日贵公司招聘广告必人特自应征该职位 I read your company's employment ad and hereby wish to apply for this position. Nerd note, 拜读 is a respectful way of saying read or read, which we'll see more of in a future episode. You can also use 本人 to refer to other people, in the sense of yourself, himself, herself, or themself, like in the following example. 必须本人来必须本人来 You must come in person, which you're likely to hear a lot of if you're applying for a visa in China. And finally, 本校 and 毕校本校 means this school or our school, and 毕校 naturally means my or our humble school. There isn't much else to it really, the same caveats that applied to the previous two examples still apply here, so let's go straight to some examples. 谢谢各位今天光临参加本校运动会谢谢各位今天光临参加本校运动会 Thank you all for attending our school sports festival today. Nerd note, here, 本校 is preferable to 毕校 because while there would certainly be people not affiliated with the school present at the sports festival, notably parents, since teachers and students are most definitely present, both part of the school's quote-unquote in-group, it wouldn't make much sense to use a humble form in this situation. 今天什么好风把你吹到毕校来今天什么好风把你吹到毕校来 What brings you to our humble school today? Nerd note, the expression 什么好风把你吹来 literally means what good wind blew you here, and is an expression used when you're pleasantly surprised to see someone. There are of course a whole bunch of other combinations for 本 and 毕, but hopefully you now have a pretty good idea on how to use them to spruce up your Mandarin Chinese. However, I would still like to add some honorable mentions here. 本国 and 毕国 In historical times, it was common for ambassadors or even rulers to refer to their home country using 毕国, my humble country. This is of course unthinkable in the modern international climate, and so you're more likely to see this expression in, say, classical literature or historical fiction, as well as when individuals speak humbly, usually a little bit tongue-in-cheek, about their own country. 本市 and 毕市 This/our city versus our humble city. 本宅 and 毕宅 This/my residence and my humble residence. 本号 and 毕号 This/our shop and my humble shop. 本部 and 毕部 This/our department versus my or our humble department, and so on. Just like with 贵, any organization can be prefixed with 本 in order to make you sound a bit more professional and formal, or with 毕 to explicitly express humbleness. Lastly, there are a few instances where 本 and 毕 do not overlap in expressions such as 毕姓, my humble surname, identical to 见姓, 毕氏, my humble wife, roughly equivalent to 见经, and 毕友, my humble friend, etc. There are many more expressions, but these should have you covered in like 90% of cases, and you should now be able to suss out the meaning of any other combinations you run into. Today we learned the honorific prefixes 本 and 毕, which can both be used to refer to yourself or your in-group in a formal and or humble way. The major difference is that 本 is the more common of the two and has a more neutral tone, while 毕 is a self-deprecating humble form. Lastly, 本, in the sense of this, can be used to refer to other people and organizations as well, depending on context, while 毕 is only used of oneself and one's in-group outside of insults. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll be out of town this week, so unfortunately there won't be another video next Monday. Regular uploads will resume on April 10th. I would be greatly honored if you'd condescend to feed the hungry algorithm by leaving a jade comment and a noble like below. Subscribe for more unworthy content and join the Chinese Merchant Guild by subscribing to my Patreon. You're all truly wonderful. Until next time, scholars.